The case of blind activist Chen Guangcheng has been testing the skills of Chinese and US diplomats and government officials over the past week. Chen used self-taught legal knowledge to defend women who had been subject to forced sterilization or even abortions during the early 2000s. However, by 2005, he fell foul of powerful local authorities in his home province of Shandong, and he was jailed for 4 years for disturbing traffic and damaging public property, charges his supporters say were trumped up. Since his release in 2010, he has been forcibly isolated in his rural house. Attempts to visit him by supporters, journalists, diplomats and celebrities have met with violent responses from those guarding him. As most people in the US, but not in China, now know, Chen escaped from this de facto house arrest last week. He also uploaded a video appeal to Premier Wen Jiabao in which he claims he and his family were abused and beaten regularly by his captors, and in which he asks for the Premier's intervention to uphold the rule of law and to protect his family. Chen eventually turned up at the US Embassy in Beijing, where his presence sparked something of a diplomatic crisis. His arrival coincided with long-planned talks between the US and China, the China-US Strategic and Economic Dialogue, which involves Hillary Clinton. On Thursday, China's official news agency Xinhua mentioned Chen's name for the first time in almost 5 years, when it said he had entered the US Embassy in Beijing in late April and left of his own volition after staying there for 6 days. A later report demanded the US apologize for interfering in China's internal affairs by allowing a Chinese citizen into the embassy via abnormal means. Chen was taken to a Beijing hospital by US officials, including Ambassador Gary Locke, and reunited there with his family. However, conflicting reports have emerged over whether he now wants to stay in China or to go to the US, and under what circumstances he left the embassy. Until Thursday, Chinese censors had aggressively blocked any mention of the story, with Chen's name or any related terms swiftly taken down by censors. So while the story dominates headlines around the world, what, if anything, do Chinese net users know about the whole bizarre incident? To find out, let's cross over now to the newsroom, where our researcher Esther Dung is standing by. Okay, Esther, this story, as I said, being reported around the world, but ironically not so much here in China. As I mentioned there, China's government censors have been really working overtime on this. So exactly when did Chinese people here behind the Great Firewall start to hear anything about this Chen Guangcheng affair?
Well, I have to say, the majority of Chinese net users knew nothing about him until very recently. In fact, until the Xinhua report of the Foreign Ministry announcement, which you mentioned. Before that, almost all information related to Chen was blocked. The first report referring to his escape from his house was an editorial published on May 2nd on the Chinese language Global Times newspaper, but it was removed very quickly from most websites. But when Xinhua broke its silence, his name begins to appear on several Chinese websites like iPhone.com, Sohu.com, and 163.com, although many of these have disabled comments. And if I type in his name, Chen Guangcheng, plenty of websites still show search results cannot be shown due to relevant laws and regulations. And all the results showing below are simply official Xinhua reports, saying that China wants the US to apologize and insisting that China is a country ruled by the law and every citizen's rights are safeguarded by the law. But censoring on Sinaweibo.com, China's main microblogging service, is much stricter. Chen's name, either in English or Chinese, his hometown of Linyi, words like blind man, escapes, US Embassy, and even the name of the escape movie, The Shawshank Redemption, none of these return any results. And lots of posters are angry at this selective information blocking. One typical example is Long de Chuanren on QQ.com. The public has the right to know. But what happens now is nothing was reported before, and suddenly we see reports about this guy. It seems the whole thing just comes out of nowhere. And this poster has this take on Huanqiu.com. To be honest, I don't know what's happened, but I feel he's achieved salvation.
Okay, but for the average Chinese net user, unless they speak English or are willing to access blocked overseas websites, the only information is going to be from official sources and presumably strictly follow the government line. Anyway, given that, what sort of reactions have you been seeing online to this?
Well, as I mentioned, All that most Chinese-based net users can access is the foreign ministry's criticism of the U.S., and so lots of the comments I've come across react to this. But it seems not many posters are happy with the foreign ministry's response, which they say is a complete show. First, listen to Mo Chuanxing, a lawyer on soundofhope.org. The reporter's question and the press conference and the spokesman's answer both seem like a setup to me. For the whole of that morning, hardly any information of where Chen is was available. And then suddenly the reporter asked this question. And for me, the ministry's announcement actually violated the law because our law makes it clear that the Constitution is aimed at safeguarding personal rights. But now the law has failed to do this and forces Chen to choose a way of saving himself. And Xue Bao has this comment on QQ.com. For me, it's just like a group of hooligans acting illegally, and when some passers-by criticize their behavior, they immediately shout that it's their domestic affair and nobody else's business. But I've also come across some posters who do believe the U.S. should bear some blame. One typical example is this poster on Huanqiu.com. I'm a Westerner myself, but I feel it's not right for the U.S. to interfere with China's internal affairs. And despite the censorship, a number of curious posters have managed to learn more details of Chen Guangcheng's story, either by accessing blocked websites with special software or simply by searching for articles about him which were published years ago. And many of these are really angry towards the local government they believe persecuted Chen and his family. First, listen to this poster on caijing.com.cn. House arrest, road closure, civilians. The blind man and his family were completely isolated from the outside world. What kind of society do we live in? How could they do such cruel things to a blind person? And this net user on the same side is also shocked. I knew some local governments are quite corrupt, but I didn't know they are so corrupt.
Now, this is an extremely sensitive case for both the US and the Chinese governments. Any suggestions from net users on how one or both of these should proceed? What should they do from here?
Well, in general, most posters feel both countries need to be extremely careful. This poster named Ruyi99 says on the overseas Chinese language website Boxun.com. This case has caused heated discussion around the world. A lot of media coverage presumes this case will cause difficulties for the Sino-US relationship and embarrassment during the US-China strategic and economic dialogue. And there are also some people who think it may well become an opportunity for further reform in China. And I've also come across an article published on the Chinese version of the Financial Times, which says what's behind Chen's case is actually the different political values between the two countries. It reads, Chen Guangcheng's case demonstrates that the human rights issue and the different political philosophies are still the most important topics between both countries, and that will dominate the international politics in the next decade.
Okay. Finally, Esther, anything else being said about this online that we haven't mentioned already?
Oh, yes. Some posters are talking about what the future holds for Chen Guangcheng. And based on the comments I've seen, posters' opinions are quite varied. The Chinese language version of the BBC's website quotes two Chinese posters who describe themselves as human rights activists in China. One is Chai Ling, who insists Chen has no other choice but to leave China for exile, while another called Wang Dan has a different opinion. As long as his safety can be guaranteed, Chen should stay in China to work for the promotion of human rights in China. And last but not least, I've seen so many posters who mention the importance of law in terms of building democracy. I'll just give one typical example from this poster named Kong Qi. From this case, we can clearly see that China lacks strong enough law. The reason people in Western countries like the US can enjoy human rights and democracy and freedom is simply because they have strict laws to ensure that anybody who violates the law will be punished. But we don't have such laws. Sometimes some officials don't even know they are violating the law.
Okay, thanks for looking into that for us, Esther. And that was China Take researcher Esther Dung with online reactions to the twists and turns in the case of blind activist Chen Guangcheng. Next on China Take, some of the top trending phrases on China's most popular search engines.